What is up, guys? Christopher Stolle. Welcome to Tinfoil Hat Society. It's been a while since we've done this show. I am here joined by Sirenity and Colin. You know them from Breaking the Fourth Wall Weekly, as well as many other shows. Sirenity has done Chris Stolle's show with me and plenty of other things. And Colin, of course, is getting ready to launch the In the Pit podcast coming this year. So make sure you keep an eye out for that. But as upbeat as I may be sounding, we're here today for something that was very disturbing 2 days ago for Christmas Day in Nashville, Tennessee. And we wanted to jump in on that. And with that, I'm going to pass this to Sirenity for the most part, because although I will help and Colin will help with bringing as much of the factuals that she's going to be bringing in, like anything that needs to be brought up for people to fact check. We're going to get into the Nashville bombing and what we've learned so far, what we speculate on, how terrible it is, and yes, some conspiracy theories to it as well. So, Serenity, go ahead, take it away. Let's get into this.
Okay, so Christmas morning, there are supposed gunshots, and there's a call that comes in saying there's gunshots in the area, and an RV broadcasts a very creepy message and then ends up blowing up. Now they have identified Andrew Quinn Warner as the suspect because of
Anthony.
Human remains. Anthony.
Yeah. Again, that's why I'm here.
Yeah, like
why I'm here.
I only know the basics, and so there was nobody injured, thank God. It happened Christmas morning, and they're bringing in a lot of conspiracy theories surrounding this incident being a false flag operation. So they were on lockdown from 4:30 p.m. till Sunday at 4:30 p.m. only in the affected area, and as far as I could tell, the affected area was 40 plus businesses. So that's a wide area that they're able to just say, you people have to stay indoors during this time. And I think that there is speculation that this might not be what we think it is, although either way, a creepy message coming from an RV saying what it said is not something that I really want to think is real.
Well, again, I don't want to. Well, I do, because we're doing a conspiracy show. From what I know of the situation, I do have the Forbes report up right now that you sent me, as far as Anthony Warner's involvement, that he's a person of interest. He's it's stated that he was a longtime person who lived in Antioch, Tennessee. And he owned an RV that resembles the one that was used on the bombing Friday morning and stuff. And he is a person of interest, according to at least this posting. But
yeah, I was going to say they've since named him as the person.
Right. But from the moment I heard it, my first thought was this is politically charged. And I don't necessarily mean like Biden and Trump. What I mean by politically charged is political ideology, in the sense that and I had this conversation with Chris Rudder too, and he offered some points that made me kind of change my point of view on it. In a sense, because I said it's the extreme left. It's the extreme left, like Antifa and BLM. They were looking to kill cops. This is my point of view on it, because of the strange message and everything else. It was meant to chase civilians away from the bombing, so that way they wouldn't get hurt. But it was meant to draw the interest of law enforcement, in which case they get a bomb squad checking out the RV, or some patrolman trying to figure out if this is a legitimate threat or a practical joke, and this thing goes off, and you bag yourself a cop. That was my thought process. Rudder brought up a very good opposite point to that, where he believes it may be the extreme right, like the Proud Boys or whatever the case may be, wanting to blame the extreme left for this. because it is set up. And his major argument, I'm gonna paraphrase it, but his major argument that made sense to me is if it was the extreme left, they would have bragged about it. They would have bragged about they were the ones that set this up. Antifa would have bragged about it. BLM would have bragged about it. The Proud Boys would not have. So but either way you look at it, whether it was the extreme right or the extreme left, to me, it was a politically charged statement with intent.
What if it's politically charged for the purposes, like, let's just say that the fear campaign that they're putting out there, the government is putting out there, and they've put down so many lockdowns and restrictions on people, they're trying to now test how much they have to do and how much they need to put more fear out there in order to get the masses to listen, because it took 15 minutes and they cleared out all that neighborhood, man. Everyone is so in fear that they just listened and went their way, and nobody was injured because of it. But it also proves the fact that we are more submissive than we have been in the past, and they could have done this anywhere.
Well, to that point, and I definitely want to get Colin's point of view because he's being kind of quiet here. But I mean, to that point of view, I agree. I agree that this is an extreme measure, whether it's the right or the left. And of course, when I say the right or left, I don't mean people like the people that are sitting here in this panel right now. I identify as a conservative, so technically, by all definitions, I'm right wing, but I am not extreme right wing. I don't hate people of color. I don't want to see people harmed in a political argument, stuff of that nature. You know, I'm a regular person who believes in less government, less taxes, more people allowed to do what they want to do, you know, to earn their living and take care of their family. That's what a true conservative is. But the fact of the matter is, regardless of left or right, the political charge, I think, is exactly like you said. It is an amount of control and a way of passing the blame. Government wants to be able to keep control like they've had for the past year almost, with the COVID-19 lockdowns and the political upheavals over Donald Trump's not my president, or whether this election was or was not valid and legitimate, or if there was a bunch of fucking, voter fraud. And regardless of which, one way or the other, these things have kept us sitting in our chairs and not doing anything as an American society. And I think a lot of people on both sides of the argument are starting to get sick and tired of being locked down in our prison cells with no control over our own lives, and are starting to push back on this. And I don't know if this was necessarily the pushback, or if this was the people who want to keep control turning around and like you said, adding extra fear to it. It's like, well, if you go against us, this is what happens, type deal. Colin, what do you think? How are you feeling on this?
Well, usually when I see things like this, I wonder, is it one of those ploys where, watch the right hand, don't pay attention to what the left hand is doing?
Right.
And that seems to be, that may be what this is. I haven't had a chance to really look over all this evidence yet. I'm trying to catch up with you guys. That's why I've been so quiet. I've been trying to read some of the information that was sent to me on this stuff.
Right.
But yeah, you gotta kind of look at it with a fine-tooth comb, and I mean that's what our FBI is supposed to do, and the CIA. They're supposed to, figure these things out and know what's going on with our country and our safety and things. And so to have RVs blowing up on street corners in our major cities sends off an alarm on a personal level, where I don't want to see anybody hurt either. But at the same time, makes you wonder what's behind it, because I mean, is this terrorist type activity that's happening from others that hate our country or hate the American way, or is this people in our own country that are manipulating the situation so that we're not paying attention to what we should be, and using this to further their own agendas that they're not telling us about, that doesn't do us any good. And people wouldn't vote on certain things. So like, oh, well, we'll just find a way to pass this law stuff so that we can control things the way we want based on some propaganda, like fake bombings that they arranged themselves and orchestrated, like watching a movie play out or watching the theater, but we take it for real. And here you go. Now that we've got the means to vote on this thing and pass this law, so that way we can just govern you however we want to. And that's the danger with stuff like this is, where is this going to lead us as Americans, as people, as citizens, because it gets scary.
Well, let me ask you both this, and I'll get both your opinions on this. And I'll hold my own opinion on it, so that way we get it from you two. Like, of course, we're talking about, like, whether it's a false flag initiative for this bombing, whether it's politically charged or just to make you think it's politically charged. But how much do you think there is a significance that not only did this happen, but it specifically happened on Christmas Day? When you look at it from this standpoint, let's take away the merchandising aspect of Christmas and look at it from the standpoint of it's the most major Christian holiday of the calendar year. It's the holiest of holy days for people who believe in Christianity. For this to happen, do you think that plays any significant role in it happening? And if so, what do you think the message was for it happening on that specific day?
All right. Well, there's different countries that have different religious belief systems, and if one of those countries has a terrorist active group and they want to make a statement, that would make sense for them to do it on a day that would totally insult and hurt Christian people. But at the same time, you have to look at it as, all right, this happened during Christmas Day, and they evacuated everybody. So they obviously orchestrated it in such a way where nobody's going to be on the street on Christmas Day on a street corner. So that tells us that they're not trying to really hurt people, but they're making more of a statement. Now, what that statement's about, okay, Christmas, for example, if that's the day, I would say it would be people that are non-Christian or non-appreciative of Christmas. And then, like, where do they blow it up at? It's in Nashville. Well, if it was near this building where they're doing this stuff, looking into the voting machines and stuff, well, that could be definitely a big sign, like, people want us to pay attention to this, or some group wants us to pay attention to what's going on with these voting machines and stuff, and they're trying to draw more attention to it. So there's that angle to look at too. That's kind of what I see.
Well, you bring up a good point before I get Serenity's take on this. Serenity did send me something that I'm going to bring up here to read now. Speaking as far as like the city and state that it happened,
Voting machine.
right, which was Nashville, Tennessee. The reason being, at least from what was reported from what she sent me here, AT&T got contacted to do a forensic audit on Dominion voting machines, and those machines were being moved to Nashville this past week. So there is kind of a political point of convenience that these machines that have been in question on whether or not they've committed voter fraud or were even programmed to do voter fraud wind up in the same city that this bombing happens, just literally a week before the bombing. Do you think that may be the target? Again, I'll go back to Serenity here for, first off, her opinion on the significance of Christmas Day, it happening, and second off, add that in.
Right.
Okay. So I think it's kind of like what Colin said, where it's like, look at here. So what they want us to look at is there was no lives lost, and these first responders came out in force, although there was a message stating, stay away, this is going to explode. Those first responders were heroes because they came out Christmas Day and risked their lives in order to check out an RV that in the end, yeah, it was filled with explosives. So none of them got hurt, but they're still heroes. Like, I guess maybe a few people got hurt, but only one police officer got knocked on his feet or something, but they're heroes. They did this on Christmas Day when they knew that there was a risk involved. So they put their life on the line. And then fast forward to the location. The AT&T building that was involved in the explosion has ties to the cooling machines that run those supercomputers. So the voting fraud that was being transferred, if you continue and read that entire thing, it explains how it's connected to the voting fraud machines, because it's a supercomputer that's storing everything, and the cooling systems that were keeping them cool were in the AT&T building. So if the cooling systems can't keep the computers that are storing all that information cold, they're going to fry.
Right.
So did it actually fry the systems? And is that kind of what they were doing? Like they flex here and you don't look here. So is that the heroes one side on Christmas Day, heroes Christmas Day, and let's take this out while nobody's looking?
Right, right. Well, like if they had an explosion, right, would that send off a shockwave? Is it big enough of an explosion to be like an electromagnetic pulse, like they did in that movie, the Toy Story movie, where it fried all the toys? I mean, is that what they're trying to do, these voting machines or something? I mean, what does this lead
Well,
into?
Well,
why?
you bring an excellent point. Like Christmas would be the perfect day to bring it into like places of businesses and AT&T, where majority of those buildings are going to be empty. They're going to be abandoned because people are home with their families. Things are closed for the holiday, whatever the case may be. So that's minimum chance of damaging people. But at the same time, it does bring up the political point of view. Again, I'll leave it to you guys to read into, but like maybe that was the purpose. The voting machines are there, the cooling machines are there. There is a question of voter fraud, so it does bring up the conspiracy theory. Maybe this bomb was intended to either make these machines overheat because it takes out the cooling system, or win the day, destroy the voting machines, in which case you destroy any evidence of whether there was or was not voter fraud from these machines.
Right,
And in
because
the
if the
process
data is
create
lost,
heroes.
yeah, if the
Yeah.
data is lost, then there's no recourse. Oh, you can't prove that there was voter fraud. So maybe that was part of their agenda or part of their goal. Whether or not that happened, I guess we'll have to wait and watch the news.
Yeah. But yeah,
Well,
that brings up a point just from what you guys were saying. Serenity, go ahead. I just that was what popped in my head when you were describing that.
they haven't declared what type of bomb it was. Like usually when something like this happens, the news reports on a lot of different things. And one thing that I find lacking is the fact that they haven't said what was used. They're still looking into it. And then they identify the person, go and search the house, and the person they haven't shown a picture of, but they say his remains are being DNA checked and all this other stuff. And then if you look a little bit further into him, last month he signed a deed over to a woman who is 29 years old, who doesn't know that she owns the house that they raided. And the woman, like, what state can you just sign your house deed over to somebody without their knowledge? Like, how many states allow that? But Nashville allows you to just sign a deed over. So who's to say that this Warner person one exists? And if it does exist, does he only exist because he transferred a house to some woman in California that doesn't even know him or something?
Well, how do you do that? Because maybe I'm wrong here. People who own homes might be able to say better than I can, but I imagine even if I were to sign my home over to Colin, for example, uh, you
And the
know,
taxes
I
are
sign
on
the
you.
deed over, you still have to pay taxes on it, in which case you'll know
Right,
that I signed the deed of my home over to you.
right, because they would send you tax forms, you would think. You
Right.
know, I mean, unless they have it set up where they pay the taxes or something, but how does that all work? I mean, that sounds like you'd have to have a lawyer involved to even write it up. So how
Some
does that
If
happen
I
without
could
somebody knowing
sign
it?
my deed over to somebody knowing, like somebody could pay my mortgage for me. Seriously, I will sign my deed over to somebody if they will pay my mortgage. Like, how is that legal?
But that's my point. Is there's always some form of paper trail because you got to pay for the property taxes, you have to pay for the deed transfer.
Right.
How does this person in California not know that this is their property if he officially signed it over?
Right. They should have got something in
Oh,
the mail saying, here's your tax credit, here's blah 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 for whatever, here's your forms to file with your tax return. for the property you own in such and such a state or whatever. I mean, my mom has that because her father left her property, rental properties in Nebraska. So she gets monies back off of that every year, but she gets a breakdown because she's part owner.
Right. So
So I don't,
Yeah,
that was missed.
that's the first red herring in that report that I'm definitely sitting there like, how does that happen? Because even in Nashville, I got to imagine there's property taxes.
Oh yeah, you
Yeah.
got to make the money.
well, and you could find images of this woman, the 29-year-old Michelle L. Swing of Los Angeles. You could see in these newscasts images of her, but they're not releasing images of Mr. Warner.
Are they speculating that the human material that was found at the bomb site of the RV was Mr. Warner, or is that the speculation?
They said, yeah, no, they identified it as his remains and said that he was inside when the bomb went off.
Okay, so he literally drove the bomb there and died there. He suicide bombered it.
That's what they're saying. Yeah. Okay. So if you read what I sent you about the AT&T, it says the AT&T building in Nashville was owned by certain people that have certain connections that is also tied to Dominion voting, and that its supercomputer in Tennessee was connected to the AT&T internet in Nashville yesterday. So they just hooked it up and they just put everything there when it went off.
Which is one of the things that that has been in the argument of the voter fraud, was that these Dominion machines are not supposed to be able to connect to the internet. That was supposed to be a precautionary measure to keep people from hacking the election results. These systems were supposed to be unable to connect to the internet. That's one of the major arguments within the voter fraud system, was that these systems did have USB drives and Wi-Fi connectors to the internet when they're not supposed to as a voting machine.
But because of pandemic, everyone's social distance, so everything's changed. I mean, what you could do online, they're putting online now. We're in a pandemic, remember?
Right. It's not like everybody's being social and going to parties and shit. I mean, we're all sitting at home.
No, I get that, but at the same time, these machines are supposed to be offline because of voter fraud. It's supposed to it's a prevention measure to make sure these things can't hardline or Wi-Fi into the internet where somebody could hack into the system and change results.
Well, we also saw that video of China saying Biden better win and they have control over our voting systems. I mean, literally, they admitted that they hacked into our voting system. So maybe they're covering a trail.
That was my initial point. Maybe that was the initial target, was not people, was maybe not even cops, but it was to destroy evidence of these machines that may or may not have had evidence of voter fraud. Because you know as well as I do, anything you do on your computer is permanently there, no matter how much you whitewash them, no matter how much you format them. At the end of the day, there are means of pulling up what you've done on a hard drive. I imagine these Dominion machines are no different. That if you dig hard enough, outside of destroying the physical component, if you dig hard enough, you could find evidence of whether it was connected to the internet site and somebody in China was changing results or whatever the case may be. Like, the evidence is there unless you destroyed the physical hard drive or machine, so that way it is unreadable.
Well, that's basically what happens if you don't have a cooling system hooked up to a supercomputer.
Right. So if they cause that to fail and it cooled down whatever it's supposed to cool down to keep it from erasing memory or from being damaged, so they can't recall the data, then that, to my thought process, is kind of like a act of terrorism.
By our
and
own government.
Up some shit. I mean, if they're trying to cover it up, they're going to find a way to do it.
I wouldn't put it past our government to try to cover their tracks. I mean, look at Watergate, for example. That's the most famous evidence. But I mean, to
Right.
believe that our government wouldn't try to cover up voter fraud or or that they've had undercover dealings with foreign dignitaries and nationalists that are primarily considered enemies of the United States of America. If you believe that, you're a naive person. Of course, there's shady back alley dealings within our government. There always has been. That's one of the reasons why people hated Trump so much, because he wasn't in the inner circles of most politicians. You know,
Right. He's a businessman by trade, you know.
he
He's
was a
not really a
businessman.
politician.
Right. He was a businessman instead of a politician. He wasn't taking bribes from China or Russia, although they tried to prove it and spent 3 years wasting our tax dollars just to prove he was innocent. That
Yeah.
was one of the major reasons they hated Trump so much, was because of that factor. But to think that our other senators, our other government officials weren't doing back alley dealings that they probably didn't want people to know about.
We still don't know what happened to Epstein.
Yeah, you know what I mean?
Right?
You know,
I wouldn't put it past anyone to cover up a big giant voter fraud. Like if this election is legit or not, I don't think either party really wants anything proven. You know, like Trump is trying to prove what he can, but he keeps getting shut down. And I mean, okay, so I think it could be Illuminati. I'm just going to throw it out there that the 3% or Skull and Bones or whatever you want to call them, the elitists, this is completely something that they would benefit from, not anyone personally like Trump or Biden or whatever. It would be more the elitists that would benefit.
well, you're absolutely right, because at the end of the day, when you look at the situation, this is an impossible situation, whether you're a Biden supporter or a Trump supporter. As far as like the general layman voter is concerned, this is a lose-lose situation, because either you prove that there was voter fraud and Trump should be our champion, should be our president, not champion, should be our president, in which case you lose any and all credibility to the voting system and the way the system works. That's a loss for America, because our foundation is our voter system and our ability to choose and our voices being heard. Or
Right. That's a strike to our soul, to our integrity.
Right. Or we stand where we're standing now, where it's like, Trump's argument is considered invalid because he's just being a sore loser and Biden's your president, in which case now you're losing confidence, not that we had much to begin with, in our legal system, be it the Supreme Court, our Congress, our senators,
Our
because
electoral college.
our electoral college, because they're more interested in their own interests, as opposed to even given the remote illusion that we have a voice and a say within our political system. So either way you look at it, no matter who wins this argument, at the end of the day, it's a losing system for the rest of us, because either we lose confidence in our leadership, or we lose confidence in the way things are done to give us our leadership.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And do we need that?
That's it. I don't think Trump even really wants to win his flex of power that he's trying to do with this whole voting thing, because I think Trump, if he cares about America, doesn't want to see our system fail, because what is that going to cause? A revolution. I mean, it's literally a revolt would happen in America. So I don't think anyone really wants to see this whole voting thing go too far. So why not just take out the source? We can't track it because the cooling systems that were running the supercomputers that were holding all the information got fried. I mean, that's an easy out for both parties.
Exactly.
Right. So there's any truth to this. They're basically defusing the bomb by blowing up a bomb.
Right. And who knows if this guy's even real, because they haven't put out that much and you can't find images of him, but it's all velvet packaged and bowed right now very tightly. Okay, this is what happened. The area is safe. Nobody was hurt. These people are heroes. Everyone's working together. Our governments are working together. Everyone's communicating. Everyone's safe. And this guy did it. And he's gone. but he never voted. He never, you know, he didn't really contribute anything or put any statements out there. So it's just tied in a nice little bow for them.
Right, but at the same time, that bow still leaves a bunch to be desired. And what's outside the box? What was this guy's motivation? Why did he make the statement that he? Let's pretend for a minute that this guy legitimately did all this. He set up the bomb. He drove it to where it is. He blew it up. Whatever is, what were his intentions? What was his statement? What was his reasoning for doing this? You've got to give me at least that to keep me from turning around saying that this wasn't a decoy tactic, that this wasn't, as Colin just said, you know, watch what my right hand's doing. Don't pay attention to what the left hand is doing. Don't pay attention to the guy behind the curtain.
Right. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. So, like, you remember in the Saw movies where it'd be like, if you don't untangle yourself from this chain within 30 seconds, then the acid will fall on your hand and take it off. You know, like, it kind of brings up these weird feelings of like a horror movie. So why would he do that? Like, that's a sociopath. Like, why would you give a notification of that if you wanted to do that and kill yourself?
See, you're absolutely right. Unlike what was presented to us in Batman's The Dark Knight, where the Joker just wanted to watch the world burn, realistically, outside of movies, most people don't do things for the sake of just doing them. There is usually some sort of motivation behind it. Whether the motivation makes sense or not, obviously, that's the argument that we could have, but this guy had to have some sort of argument. He didn't just want to blow up an RV for the sake of blowing up an RV. There was a reason behind it. What was his reason?
Right. There's some kind of a motive or some kind of goal, and who knows? He's probably sitting somewhere. I mean, he's dead now, but at some point he was sitting somewhere, be like,
right.
Let's pretend that it's real. Okay. Like, in the Saw movies, the guy had cancer and was getting back at somebody. So this guy, did he have cancer? What was he getting back at law enforcement by alerting them to get away? And he called attention to the location because of gunshots fired, but not a whole lot comes of that.
Hey, look,
you know,
look, I could put it to you this way, and this is the most simplistic answer they can give that would probably be accepted by most people. I'll do it this way. This guy blew up this shit because of the fact that he was a Trump supporter and he felt that his vote wasn't being counted. There's your motivation, but it's still at least a motivation.
But then they'd have to say that the supercomputers have the information and that the cooling towers were there. That's still giving away too much information.
Right, but in that scenario, they could turn around and say he just believed that his vote wasn't counted because he believes in this voter fraud shit, so he blew shit up, as opposed to somebody who would be a little bit more rational about it. Well, let's find out if these machines actually did commit voter fraud. He's just automatically, they committed voter fraud. I feel my vote wasn't counted, so I'm going to take out the people who fucking screwed my vote.
Let's take the voter thing out of it.
It's still at least a motivation. Right now, it's just he decided, he got drunk one weekend, decided, it'd be really fun on Christmas Day. You know what I mean?
But that's how they're reporting it. You have to understand that the news is reporting it as they don't know why he did it. They're not saying anything about the cooling or anything. They're just saying, this guy did it. We don't know why. We have 250 plus officers working on it to find out why and what would motivate him to do it. They're not giving us a reason. They're just identifying him without a picture, just a name, some background information.
We got about a minute left on this before it kicks us out of here. Do we want to do a part 2 on this, or are we going to wrap up here? Because I can download this episode and then we can bring, I can bring everybody back into the chat and we can have a second connection to it.
Let's do a good finale. Yeah.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure before it kicks us, so that way you guys stay by your computer. I'll send a new link. All right. So let's continue on for the last minute, and when it kicks off, we'll just pick up when I reinitiate the chat.
Okay.
All right.
Sounds good. Why don't you guys why don't you guys read the thing that I sent you?
All right, well, I'll do that while I'm downloading the first episode because I can't reinitiate the chat until I download the episode because it'll automatically download as soon as
My mind goes to all these TV shows you see now that have like the think tank people that sit there, like what is it, Criminal Minds or something, and there's some other ones where they got like these people that are like really smart and they're like geniuses and they know how to do all the numbers and math in their heads and everything, and they've got all these weird techies and they all work together to figure out what's going on. So I mean, I imagine what those.
Hi, this is Dave from the Comic Collection, the ultimate comic store here in Feasterville, Pennsylvania, which is a suburb of Northeast Philadelphia. Come and see all of the great stuff we have here at the Comic Collection, including action figures, vinyl, CDs, Dungeons and Dragons, Magic the Gathering, Pokemon, back issues, action figures, old action figures as well, statues, and of course, let's not forget comic books. Come visit us at the Comic Collection at 83 Bustleton Pike, Feasterville, PA 19053, right next to Northeast Philadelphia. Come visit us. We'll look forward, and yes, we are open during this pandemic thing.
Grabbing my nighttime medication.
Well, while you're grabbing that, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that commercial. Colin, why don't you go ahead and pick back up where you left off in your rant? Since we
Right. So I don't know. We got these different TV shows like Criminal Minds and CSI and CSI Miami and FBI, freaking whatever, X-Files type stuff, but they always have this group of these think tank people that they figure out all different types of avenues for what is this person's motivation, why did they do this terrorist act, or why did they blow up this, or what's their ties to the community, and who knows what they were up to, who else is involved in this, is it conspiracy, is it multiple people involvement or whatever. I mean, I imagine those type of people right now were going nuts because they got so much to try to figure out. But that's how we get our information. They solve the case or whatever, and then they put it on the news.
Well,
So
according to Tennessean, which is one of the things Serenity sent me, federal authorities say the 63-year-old Antonoc man was responsible for a Christmas morning bombing that left the suspect dead and captured the nation's attention over the holiday weekend as officials work to determine who parked an RV downtown to detonate. What motivated him is still unknown. Hundreds of federal, state, and local law enforcement officers worked to solve the case, and just 60 hours after the explosions, agents Sunday evening named Anthony Quinn Warner as the bomber. He died in a blast. He was present when the bomb went off, and he perished in the bombing, said Don Cochran, U.S. Attorney for the Middle District of Tennessee. That's literally all the information they give on him. I don't see a 63-year-old man trying to bomb something in Tennessee. But let me read this thing too, because Serenity gave this one too. So let me read this one out too, and we'll discuss on this.
Yeah.
This is about the AT&T center that looks like it was the target of the bombing. AT&T got a contact to do forensic audit on Dominion voting machines, and those machines were being moved to Nashville this past week. The former owner of the AT&T building in Nashville, William Kennard, is a board member for Cerberus Capital Management and AT&T. He also was Bill Clinton's FCC chair and Obama's ambassador to the EU. Dominion Voting is owned by Cerberus Capital Management. Cerberus is run by Staple Street executives. Joe Biden's brother-in-law, Steve Owens, is the co-founder of Staple Street Executives, along with William Kennard, mentioned above. Supercomputer in Tennessee was connected to the AT&T internet in Nashville yesterday evening, and Cumberland River cooling system was compromised due to internet outage and supercomputer fried. If you don't know, Kraken is a reference to a supercomputer former prosecutor, Sidney Powell, has been talked about. So the explosion, quote unquote, just happened to be at the AT&T location where they just so happened to control the cooling system for the supercomputer and house the Dominion voting machines and drives for forensic audit.
right?
I won't read
And
the
this,
last part of it because the last part of it is just her throwing her own inflections in who posted that. But I mean, again, it shines light on this wasn't just a random act of senseless violence. There had to be some sort of motivation behind it.
I think that it has to do with the voting fraud because um, the guy was an IT tech. Okay, like the information that's come out is he works on computers. He loved his pets. He's a good guy, but he's a psychopath. Like he was playing the song Downtown from 1964. You know, where do you go for your troubles, your worries? You go downtown
Right.
from the RV.
Or whatever. Yeah.
He was playing that song from the RV like it was a party and then saying, hey, warning, if you could hear this, evacuate the area. So, like, it's a terrorist act by somebody who's an IT guy that happened to be in front of a cooling system center for the Dominion voting information. Like,
Well, I'm gonna jump down the rabbit hole here for a second, but just reading off of the Tennessean thing here. Who's to say this guy was the one who drove the RV? Like, of course, his humanity matter was found at the scene of the crime, you know, when the RV exploded. But who's to say he was a driver and wasn't somebody who was, for lack of a better term here, tied up in the back and used as a scapegoat?
He's a patsy, maybe.
That's what I'm thinking. Like, you know, with the lack of evidence and lack of information, he could just as easily been somebody who was tied up in the bathroom of the RV. So that way his body parts would be found after the explosion, and it was somebody else who had the political motivation. Because again, from what I'm reading of this guy, I'm not seeing him have a motivational reason to do this outside of, you know, just snapped one day. But it's feeling more like he was a plant than the legitimate attacker. I base that purely on reading between the lines. I'm not offering any evidence behind that, so take that with the grain of salt that it is.
Well, didn't they say the same thing about the man who shot Kennedy, right?
Right, Oswald.
Oswald, yeah, they said the same thing, or he was claiming to be a patsy, and everybody was like, all like, "Oh, well, did he do it, or is he just being set up, or what?" You know, I mean, so there's going to be conjecture like that no matter what you do, but there
Right,
could
but
be truth to it.
it took
We won't
30
know.
years to prove that Oswald didn't kill Kennedy because it was just impossible for him to do all the shots that he was doing with the gun that he had, plus the angles that Kennedy was hit. Proved
Right,
that it didn't come from the book depository tower. It came from the grassy knoll across the way.
right, because we didn't have Bluetooth bullets you could control with your smartphone that can go zipping, zapping everywhere, and some magic bullet shit that just doesn't happen.
Right. So it took 30 years, but they actually proved Oswald wasn't actually the killer of Kennedy.
Right, even if he
That
was
30,
involved, he
40
wasn't
years
alone.
down the line, it doesn't come out that this guy was a victim and not the attacker.
Right, yeah, and we'll have to wait and see what happens in the news to find out that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's really right about it in history because this kind of stuff, you know, with voters and voting fraud that they're going after, this is going to make huge history in the history books.
Well, let me.
but they're not speaking about the voting fraud side of it. They're only speaking about the lack of infrastructure safety that this has brought out. I mean, like it brought down 911 and it's affected cell phones in multiple states.
Well, again, that's again the pay attention to the right hand so you don't know what the left hand is doing. They're paying attention to the fact that a guy went nuts and blew up an RV downtown Nashville, but they're not talking about what the target could have been or what was around the area outside of small businesses because they don't want you to say, well, wait, why was the RV parked where all these voting machines were?
Right.
They don't want to
distract
draw attention. Yeah, they don't want to draw attention to
Watch
the
this
fact
fan. Don't watch this fan over here.
yeah. You know, so that
No,
makes total sense. But again, the motivation behind it, especially with the who they're pinning this on, the only thing we have to prove that this guy was the culprit was that it was his vehicle and that his body matter was found at the scene of the crime. But that doesn't mean that somebody didn't jack his RV and fucking kill him and then leave his body in the RV when it blew up. I'm not saying
Right.
that's what
The
happened. I'm saying it's just as reliable as what they're offering right now.
Right. I mean, what's the autopsy say about this guy? Did the explosion kill him? Did he off himself? Did he bite a bullet before the thing blew up?
Right.
Or did he let it blow up and blow himself up? Or was he already dead in the thing and rigor mortis was setting in already? And now they're going to find out later when they do the autopsy and finally release it to all of us.
Right.
I don't really think that you could tell that from pieces of a body.
I think you should still be able to tell if, like, even from a piece of a body, if the blood is liquidy or if it's congealed, which is usually your first indication of whether somebody was dead before or after the body was found. You know what I mean?
Right. Well,
Think
you
with
see,
the
living
fire.
tissue reacts differently to fire and flames and things like that. And, dead tissue reacts totally different than live human flesh because if it would have happened, and the guy was alive, it would affect his body differently. But if he's dead, he's not going to have any telltale signs. So it's like they're gonna have to look at that and find out, okay, what was in his lungs? What kind of air was in his lungs? Was it the air that was inside of that vehicle, or was it other air? Was it maybe there's water in his lungs because he was drowned somewhere? I mean, we won't know until we hear the news.
Right. And I'm by no means am I a forensic scientist in any way. I've got, a couple seasons of CSI under my belt. That's about as close to it as an expert in forensic science as I am. But,
Right.
maybe one of our listeners actually is a forensic scientist and give us an insight on what the markers would be to prove whether, this guy was exploded post-mortem or pre-mortem. You know what I mean?
Right. Because there's microorganisms that your body stops fighting off, and things that start growing on your flesh and on your eyeballs and all your body parts that they can look at a microscopic level and find out, oh, this person was dead for like 12 hours because these bugs have already laid eggs and they're already hatching. So that they know how long it takes for a person to die and decompose. So they can calculate that, and we'll know in a matter of days. They'll have to release something about this. It's just waiting. Like, okay, bite my nails. I'm waiting to hear what the heck's going to happen with this.
But is it a telltale sign that if they do an autopsy and they don't release the reports, does that kind of confirm our, right now as it stands, conspiracy theories that this is a government or politically motivated agenda?
Right, because they wouldn't have any reason or motivation to not release autopsy results of what if this person was the guilty culprit, of what type of investigation is going on. As the investigation progresses, the local authorities would be letting the press know, yeah, we're having a press conference, yada yada yada. This is what we know so far. Have a nice day.
That
Whatever,
went bad. When they had the press conference, the mayor was seen laughing or something, and they were making light of the situation and trying to be on a upbeat type note, saying how strong Nashville is and how these people were heroes because they knew that there was a risk, but they were still there evacuating people and checking out the RV and all that. So the news is kind of jaded on everything, and I honestly don't think that they're going to come out with an autopsy report because they've just identified him, sealed it with a bow.
Well, I'll say this much. I agree with the government officials of Tennessee that Tennesseans are strong and can rise above this. And I absolutely 100% agree that the people who ran towards the danger instead of away from it are absolutely heroes, our first responders, our police, our EMTs. That absolutely is 100% and total correct. With that said, the government official, the mayor, whoever he was, the governor, who was sitting there laughing and making light of the situation, you are I don't care if it is politically, turns out to be politically motivated or not, or if this is just a random acts of senseless violence. You, sir, are a piece of shit for laughing at this in any way, shape, or form. This is not something to laugh at. This is literally laughing at some kid crying because their dog got run over by a car. It may not be in the grand scheme of the world significant, but that still meant the world to that little kid, and you're laughing at him. That's how much of a piece of shit you are.
Right. Yeah. Terrorism, acts of terrorism are not something to laugh at. It's not a joking matter. I don't understand why a mayor of a city would laugh at something that's hurting individuals or hurting property in his own community.
Mm-hmm.
to me, that's like, are you qualified to be the mayor? Are you're like laughing about this? Like, what are you, a joker or something? I mean, we should let Joe Pesci go off on him. Like, what, you laughing at me? Oh, you think I'm funny? A funny guy or what?
Yeah. Yeah.
But what if the mayor was paid by the elitists $1 million to rebuild the infrastructure of Second Street? And to him, no lives were lost. Everything went off according to plan, and everything's done, over with, and no lives were lost, no injuries really sustained, no buildings blown up. So it was a success. So he was kind of celebrating, you know?
But at the same time, you worked in the wrestling industry the same as I did. We've had matches where everything was phenomenal and great, and let me use this as an example. You managed me. I did a match. I lost to Prodigy. It was a great match. Looked awesome. Fans enjoyed it. But in front of those fans, I'm not going to sit there, stand up, celebrate, and hug you and say, hey, we did a great job. No, I'm supposed to sell it that I'm pissed off that I lost. If this guy was doing that, he blew his own gimmick by sitting there laughing and smiling and playing it off like it was nothing to somebody, to his constituents who are looking at this as a senseless violence on Christmas Day and should be something that is somber and mourning, not something that should be, well, they didn't do shit to Tennessee, so we're good. No, fuck that. You don't do that. He, in my mind, he blew his own cover. He blew his own gimmick.
Right. Kind of makes
Yeah.
yourself look like a derelict, like, oh yeah, there's a tragedy. I'm just going to sit here and laugh about it. It's like, what do you think you are? Don't you think that people are kind of like, wow, the insurance agent that has to file that claim, now he has to do work. Don't you think he's pissed off? He has to file that claim. And
It's kind of
whatever
like
other
a funeral.
businesses.
Yeah, it's like a
Yeah.
funeral.
Yeah.
Like you celebrate the life, but something died. So I think that it's a matter of opinion, because like there's a separation of people who believe that you should party at somebody's funeral. When somebody dies, we celebrate their life. And then there's the other part of the people where if somebody dies, you give them Kleenex and they cry. So I think that people just react different in situations.
That's
that are
fair enough,
crazy.
but to use your funeral metaphor here, to me, him going on national television and making light of the situation and joking about the situation is like going to a funeral of somebody you didn't like and you sit there and laugh that the fucker is dead. It's still disrespectful to everybody else who's mourning what's going on, in that particular.
Right. Like Mama used to say, if you ain't got nothing nice to say, don't say nothing at all.
Right. And again, I could be reading completely into it. I'm not saying that I'm an expert in it, but that's the way it feels to me, is that it's like, walking into somebody you really can't stand's funeral and going, fucker deserved it. You know what I mean?
Okay, so let's go back to this suspected person that took it out. His neighbors were interviewed and said that he never had any political agendas, never spoke about religion, never had signs up or anything about, Trump, Biden, either side of it.
Right.
So the news is saying he's, the neighbors said he's a good guy. He built the fence. He didn't even have boxes shipped to his house. He would go to the post office to pick them up. Like, they're giving a lot of information about the guy, but they're not giving the whole story, because if they admit to the voting information, then that would build on the conspiracy theories, which it's not even hashtagging. I mean, nobody's really trending on the Nashville incident. It's kind of like it happened and everyone moved on already. Like the funeral happened right after.
I said that to you on I think it was Christmas Day or yesterday at least, when you and I were talking about it, and I was trying to look up more information, and I'm like, there's more hashtags for Luke Skywalker showed up in the Mandalorian than this event, which is obviously more important than a Star Wars episode. You know what I mean? In the grand scheme of life. But people were more interested in stuff like that than discussing this, which to me in its own right is disturbing.
Well, I think because of pandemic and all the protests and all the upheavals that have happened, that we're kind of a little bit desensitized to acts of violence. So we see so many happen in a week. This one would have been a major impact if it happened in 2018. It would have been newsworthy everywhere, but we've desensitized humanity to all this violence that is just part of the news feed. And yeah, Mandalorian and the Jedi are a lot more popular and get a lot more interest than anything like this.
Well, absolutely. I mean, even in the news outlets, like if I go on YouTube and look at like Fox and CNN and all that, most of what they're trending is still about like Biden's fucking COVID-19 vaccine. And of course, everybody's talking about the $600 stimulus package. Those are the trending things. RV blowing up on Christmas Day seems just an afterthought. You know,
Right. Maybe everybody's so depressed about all the crap with the COVID, they're like, oh, great, another downer. Skip that one. Let's go move on to something else, right?
right. But at the same time, you would think they would still, news should report the news, whether grim or not, you know, and it doesn't seem like they are. Again, we all know, and we can all agree that the news is no longer the impartial, unbiased, facts-driven medium that it's supposed to be it newspaper or mainstream media or whatever. We know they have political agendas, and they lie by omission on many things if they don't want the narrative followed. You know, we've seen that long before Trump. We've seen it especially during Trump's administration. You know, that you really can't trust the source. But even on a local level, that this isn't being talked about. Like I can't go to Fox News Tennessee and find more information on this outside of a 30-second blurb is disturbing.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, what kind of investigative journalists do they have out there that are going after this thing, and digging and finding out and talking to different FBI agents or different sheriff's department agents or whatever municipality is covering it, you know, just to find out, okay, what's the update? When are we going to hear another news conference? What's going on with the investigation? We want to know, you know, somebody's going to be, and we're just going to have to wait and twiddle our thumbs and find out, I guess.
I think the book's going to be closed on this within days. I think it's going to be old news.
They'll be swept under the carpet.
And yeah, and that kind of leads into why I think it's a false flag, like why I think it's an operation that happened by the government or elitists or somebody. Like I think that this was a planned event, and that they're just giving us what we want to hear, just to tie it in a bow, seal it off, close the book. We got rid of it. You know, the
Right.
voter information.
Yeah, orchestrated distraction is what you're saying, and that very well could be.
But distraction from what is the main question. That's what I want to dig into on your false flag narrative. Is it as simple as they wanted to eradicate a couple Dominion machines, or is there what do you think they're more trying to cover up or distract us from in overall with this action?
Or what are they
Everything
trying to
that's on
not advertise about?
supercomputers.
You know, maybe
Yeah,
they're
the
not trying to,
voting information.
right. I mean, and then the media's not really covering it at all that well, right? So what does that tell you? You know, I mean, something like this should be covered. And if the media is not taking that close of attention to it, well, I mean, who's greasing their palm to keep their mouth shut? I mean, does one of their sponsors say, no, we don't want you covering that too closely. Back off of that story, or else we'll cut your sponsorship or something?
Right.
I mean, because
But it's a lose-lose situation for everyone if the voter information comes out either way. Either way, if they analyze those voting machine hard drives, it's a lose-lose situation. So they really just want to seal it off and take care of it and close the book. And all of us aren't going to hear anything. And if we do hear anything, it's going to be conspiracy theorists like us talking about it. And news media outlets are not even going to care about talking about anything.
Well, let me ask the elephant in the room, the argument in the room, the elephant in the room here. We all pretty much agree, and it's fair to say that we all hold our own political spectrum, you know, as far as like this isn't an echo chamber, you know. Like I said, I'm conservative. I believe Colin's a little bit more liberal. Sirenity, I think you're more of a centrist. So we kind of follow the spectrum overall as far as political points of view, but yet we can all agree that the mainstream media, be it newspapers, magazines, news channels, or cable news, or whatever source for news information is, has pretty much, for lack of a better term, been compromised to political biases. How do we fix this problem? How do we get the information back on track to the hands of the people? Like what is the proper way of putting this information back in the hands of responsible people to actually give the facts regardless of who it might hurt in the long run?
I don't think there's any way to get rid of what we've seen the news turn into, which is opinions by one side or the other. I mean, Samantha Guthrie, when she did the Trump interview during, the whole before everyone voted, she literally was calling him some nasty things and attacking him. And he was our president. Okay, whether or not you like him or you hate him, she was attacking our president verbally, and the look in her eye was just freaking evil, man. Like, I'm sorry. I rewound that and replayed that probably 20 times because I couldn't believe what I was witnessing. The lack of respect that the media has makes me think that the media and the elitists probably run our country, and that can only be changed by using the smaller people that are the pencil pushers or computer people that are actually the ones putting everything through in our government, that are actually the ones checking the boxes. Those are the only people that could change anything, because they're the ones who actually run the government. Everybody else just follows orders.
Well, what about in the hands of the people, like us? We're in the grand scheme of things. Okay, yeah, we're a podcast group, so we have kind of quote unquote internet influence. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, we are Joe and Jane public. You know what I mean? As far as the world is concerned, nobody gives a shit about us. But is the power in our hands to be able to, if we chose to do so, follow the trails of facts and report the news the proper way? Is that the way we take the power out of the hands of people who are using it for political gain?
Is it working for
Not only
Alex Jones or Joe Rogan?
Right. Well, what about the monetary gain that they're getting too, that they're not talking to us about? It's just, well, like, I think the NFL is rigged because, I mean, who makes millions of dollars and wouldn't have Butterfingers for an extra million if they're not getting their salary cap? They don't got to talk about it, but it's there.
Right.
And politicians did the same way. The media, they're going to be the same way. Oh, you don't want us to run the stories on this particular politician or this story? Okay, fine. Well, they get paid off. So now, okay, yeah, the guy who edits everything and the guy who sets up the chronology for their news broadcast says, no, we're not doing that story. Take that one out. And it's like, it's out of everybody else's hands because it's in the power of the hands of the people that have the money, that are greasing their palm. And what their agenda is, they're not going to pass on to anybody, because that would screw up. And we probably won't hear about the results of what was really behind all this for a couple of years. But that's how it goes. I mean, they didn't declassify stuff for Kennedy for years and years after because they want to make sure everybody was dead first.
Right. Well,
I don't think that this incident will ever be declassified because it's not a big enough. It's not like JFK almost got shot. I mean, like, this is small in the whole scheme of what the elitists are probably trying to do. So I don't think this will ever be talked about after.
Right. And if this person is trying to make a statement, they're trying pretty hard to squelch that person's statement by controlling what media is covering it and how much attention it gets. Meaning that whoever's behind all this, they wanted to make a statement, and the powers that be are saying, no statement. No, we're going to just sweep this under the rug because we don't want any attention to these voting machines. That's what I see.
Which again goes back, again to the narrative and why this narrative is different. Why is this guy's statement, if it was him that did it, why is this guy's statement unimportant, but like the shooter in Colorado who dressed up like the Joker and shot up people in the movie theater. Why was his statement so important that we got it for about a year? Hearing about his mental instability and his reasonings for dressing up like the Joker and shooting people. Like, his statement was heard. Why is this statement unimportant? What is the confining difference that changes the narrative?
Right. And what is the message here? I mean, a part of the message I'm thinking that I'm seeing a little bit distorted now, but through rose-colored glasses, I guess you could say, is if this guy had a message or had some kind of a statement that he wanted to make, how come he's not getting the attention that these other people that are terrorists that do these wild things get? I mean, he obviously orchestrated this all and set it up at this RV and stuff, and went through a lot to do this. But to me, it says, okay, Black Lives Matter, but voting machine lives don't.
Right.
Right?
And I saw Serenity's look on her face when I mentioned the shooting in her backyard, for lack of a better term. I wasn't trying to bring up bad memories. I was just trying to prove a point of, like, one madman's motivations are
Right.
analyzed to death, but another madman's are just swept under the rug.
Oh,
Well,
I remember
this is
well. I lived in Colorado, and me and her were hanging out all the time at that point. And I remember when that happened. That was sucky. That was weird because everybody was talking about it. It was all the buzz every time I hopped on the bus or anything or got to work. Everybody was talking about it in the lunchroom. I mean, it was big topic. And now how come this other guy's got this bomb going off in this RV at a point when it's kind of important that what's going on inside the building right next to it, it's got these machines and nobody's really covering it? I mean, that's kind of fishy in itself.
Especially with the way it's presented. Like you said, it's an RV that was playing downtown from the 1960s with a repeating thing saying, "Stay away if you don't want to get hurt." I mean, can you get any more 66 Batman campy villain with it and it's not drawing attention?
Right.
well, it literally said, if you could hear this, evacuate the area.
Right.
Okay, like, it is the creepiest music slash message I have ever heard. Like, it gives me goosebumps even thinking about who would do such a thing, like, in their brain. And he supposedly quit his job in December, transferred this house over to this other woman, had a audio recording putting all this out there, but they still have no motive behind it. Like, he had enough forethought to put together a music clip with a warning, with a countdown, with all this other stuff. He transferred his house. He quit his job. He tied up all these loose ends. He left his house and he drove there. They have surveillance proving that he was alone during all this time and never came in contact with anyone else. But there's no motive. Like,
Where's his manifesto?
yeah, like, you would find something if he did all this to just blow himself up and not say anything about why. He had
Right.
to have said why. They're just not telling us that he did it for that supercomputer.
Right.
Well, I mean, depression is pretty rampant with all the COVID, everything, and everything's shut down and stuff. But I didn't think it would drive somebody to do all of this, orchestrating this whole thing with the RV and all this, and the music and the whole bit. I mean, to me, it just seems like overkill. And it's like, okay, this guy had a message. What is his message? And put the pieces together. These voting machines are right there. To me, it's kind of like, well, obviously he's trying to attract attention. And so the people don't stop thinking about the fact that, yeah, there's a possibility that voter fraud's going on. In which case, I mean, the Electoral College pretty much handles whatever we get for president anyhow. But still, just to think that something that's put out there for us to actually have a voice and an opinion in our country and it's being messed with, I mean, that makes me angry, honestly, that anybody would think about manipulating that system. And then for somebody else to try to bring attention to, like, hey, this is what's up, and kaboom, I'm blowing this thing up to show everybody, don't watch what the left hand's doing, watch what's going on over here. And then everybody's squelching it and nobody's bringing really that much attention to the media on it. Makes me think, like, what else aren't they telling us, really? Because there's a lot out there that they've been hiding from us for years, and they're going to keep doing it unless we start talking about it.
Well, the bottom line is to you guys, the listeners listening in. I mean, you sat here for about an hour and listened to us give our views and opinions, reading off what little facts there are to go off of this case, and then the rest of it, obviously, is speculation and our own opinions and points of view on it. But what do you guys think? We want to hear what you think. So make sure you're commenting down below. Do you agree with us? Do you have a different outlook on it? Do you think maybe we're just grasping at straws? Let us know in the comment section down below. This is the rebirth of the Tinfoil Hat Society. We are going to bring this show back because I'm sure people like Chris Rudder and our own Sirenity here, they love a good straw man argument. They
Debate.
love a conspiracy theory. They love to dig into things that people don't want to talk about. So I think we're going to be coming back with that a lot more often. But guys, thank you very much for hanging out with us. I hope you enjoyed this content. And I guess the final thing I could say on behalf of Colin and Sirenity here is our thoughts and prayers go out to the first responders and the people of Nashville, especially on, the holiest of days for the Christian calendar. You don't want to hear negative things like this. And it's absolutely heartbreaking. And I hope the truth will out in the end. So on the end of it, guys, thank you very much. Have a happy new year, and we'll catch you on the next Tinfoil Hat Society. Have a good night.